Hey y'all, today we are diving deep into the strategy and the structure of planning, creating, and scheduling your content. This was a hot topic in my comments recently, and I knew it deserved an entire episode. So keep listening if you want to know more about batching your content. Welcome to the Social Takeoff Podcast, a podcast for travel professionals who are ready to use social media to help their business take off. I'm Kelli Smith, your host. I'm travel agent turned social media marketer who now works with multiple seven-figure travel agencies to help them infuse strategy and create a target social plan. I'll be sharing all of the tips and tricks of the trade, as well as content ideas and trends that you should be using to help grow your travel business. Let's get started. So when my business really started booming back in September, I had this wild idea that we would try to stay 8 weeks scheduled in advance. And what I found was I felt so disconnected by the content calendars that I was creating that far in advance, because in order to create and schedule that content that far in advance, I need to create the calendar 3 months in advance so that the teams of agencies and agents have plenty of time to contribute their content that they need to contribute, that my team has the opportunity to put it in place, create it, that it gets approved, everything. So in order for that, I had to create content calendars 3 months in advance. And I did find that I felt extremely disconnected from the content. I felt extremely, I didn't feel like it was irrelevant, and we're going to talk about why, but I did feel like we were changing a lot. So that did not work. That idea of mine did not work when we pulled back and started creating and planning and scheduling it, being scheduled 1 month ahead of time, which means I'm writing the content calendar about 6 weeks ahead of time. And it feels good. We feel like we are on track with that. Here's the deal. In travel, you can only market certain things at certain times. So I have clients that go to these destinations, and if things are seasonal, like Disney, for instance, is in Festival of the Arts right now, I love getting that content. We can create some reels and some certain things, but like if we are creating content for Festival of the Arts in January and advertising book Festival of the Arts in January, we're doing it too late, because the Festival of the Arts will be over by the time they can get down there. So right now, we should be marketing in Walt Disney World. We should be marketing for like Food and Wine Festival, because there's still time to book and get rooms and all of those things now, because that happens in the fall. And it's the same thing with things like Alaska. In Alaska cruises run from May to September. If you are marketing Alaska cruises in May to September because that's when people are traveling, you're missing the mark, because you're not marketing it at a time where they can actually book and go. So we would market in the fall and early winter to start traveling in May to September. So when you're creating your content calendar, there are some things that don't move. And so when you're creating this content calendar, you should already have a really good idea of what needs to be talked about. And then each month, as you break down the specifics, you can look at your numbers or your goals or where you're at in those goals, and then create content that fits inside what makes sense in your marketing calendar to push you forward. So you should have a rough idea for the entire year of what you will market when and how you will talk about it when. And then as you get specific in the content you're creating, that can come on a monthly basis based on what is happening in the minute. Now, where your weekly content plan has to come in is when you are talking about things that pop up, like promotions or announcements or whatever, those get built in and come in supplementary. They don't take the place of the content you had already planned and marketed. They are supplementary. And I think that I talked about this in an earlier podcast. I'm not 100% sure, but I think I did, in the fact that promotions don't actually sell trips. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but the promotional content is going to have a lot less push to a cold lead to book. You're going to be much more likely to book a warm lead with promotional content than a cold lead, because more than likely they've been watching your content and they have their interest already peaked. And now that this promotion has come up, it's like, oh yeah, I'll go ahead and do that because I've already been interested in it. So your regularly scheduled content creates the warm lead, as does your engagement and your community building and your relationship building. All of those create your warm market. And then when that promotion comes up and available, they are pushed towards going ahead and getting in for that because you have warmed them up. You've primed them and they're ready to buy because of the other content you're creating. And you can do that at a broader scale further out to take the pressure off of you week to week. It's not irrelevant because you should be able to look at the entire year and know what needs to come when. So while I think it's a great plan, if you have the time to sit down each week and carve out that content and write it and schedule it, you should be looking at a rough schedule for the entire year by knowing what is seasonal and when it needs to be marketed and all of those pieces, right? And this promotional content or these new pieces, these changes, they get brought in different ways and as supplement to the already scheduled content that you have going. So let's talk about that overwhelm piece. When you start to feel overwhelmed because 1 month at a time of creating feels stressful. Well, first off, you don't have to do it in one day, okay? If one day it feels too stressful for you to create content, like 12 pieces of content, then take 2 days and create 6 pieces. Or take 3 days and create 4 pieces each time, right? Or do all of your graphics, which is what I like to do if I'm in the creation mode. I like to create graphics together because once I create one, I get on that, like my headspace is in there and I'm in creative mode and it's like, oh yeah, that would look good here. Let's do, and I'm in Canva, I'm doing that thing, and I feel really good about where I'm creating. Same thing happens for caption writing with me. All right, I'm already in a storytelling mood. I'm ready. Like next, I'm ready to do it. So batching really helps you not only save time, but it lets your brain width, instead of your bandwidth, your brain width go to the right place and stay there in focus. I know not everybody's mind works that way. And there is not a right way and a wrong way to do this. You have to do what works for you, but don't let the planning and the overwhelm be why you can't be consistent. Allow yourself to create the plan that works for you. So here are things that I recommend. I'm going to give you about 5 tips. This is not going to be a super long episode. I'm going to give you about 5 tips for getting content done. So content, calendars, schedules, whatever. If you do it in a week or a month, keep a running note on your phone, whether it be typed or voice memoed to yourself. When you have a content idea, you don't always have to sit down and create it right that minute, but don't lose it either. Keep it somewhere that we always have our phones with us. Keep it somewhere on your phone that you can go back to, right? That is tip number 1. And tip number 2, if you are stumped for content ideas, go back to past content you've created and see how you can talk about it in a different way. Then tip number 3 is the biggest tip I could possibly give you. If you are working in Canva and you are creating graphics, don't reinvent the wheel every single time. If you create a graphic that you love, save it as a brand template on your Canva account and use it over and over again. You can change your colors around, your fonts, whatever, but use that template again and again and again, because it really will help you to not feel so stumped staring at a computer because you don't know where to put things in a graphic. Those are my big tips, because it takes that overwhelm down. If you sit down to create content and you don't have a list to draw from, that is stressful. But if you have been ongoing lists for a month, I have lists in my phone for every client I have. Oh yeah, that would make a great post for this client. Or this client sent me an email talking about something. That would make a great piece of content. I saw this in this client's Facebook group, and that would make a great piece of content. I can pull from that when I sit down to create content calendars. And then the first thing we do for all of our clients is create those templates. It's branded. It's very obviously their brand. When people see it, they will know who it belongs to. And my social media management VAs don't have to reinvent the wheel for every piece of content. It can get out and get done in an efficient manner. But I am going to talk about one more thing. And if you hear nothing else through this podcast, this is the most important thing that you can possibly do. Okay? When you are in creation mode, you cannot simultaneously be in consumption mode. And what do I mean by that? I have a hard and fast rule when I am creating content. If I am creating, I am not consuming. I do not consume while I create unless it's from my own content. So if I am working on a client's content calendar, I am not scrolling anybody else's content except theirs to pull ideas from. Because if you consume and create at the same time, you will find yourself imitating other contents. If you keep that list, you read something and it sparks an idea in your head, and you keep a running list, you're being inspired by. But if you are consuming to get ideas in that moment, you will find yourself imitating rather than being inspired by. So a hard and fast rule is you don't consume when you create. And I am a firm believer, content is not competition. We are all talking to, every client I have is talking to a different type of audience. So there's no competition between clients' accounts, and there's no competition. We don't do it that way because number one, success is not pie. And number two, there is a very individual brand voice and identity between everybody that you see. So own that brand voice and that brand identity for your work, and really be focused on, if I'm being inspired by, great, but don't consume when you create, so that you don't find yourself losing your own brand identity in that process. And that will really help you have less overwhelm in the sense of creation of content, and really allow you to be proud of the content that you create because it's so uniquely you. Okay. I want this topic and this conversation to continue. So I want you to come to my DMs, and I want you to tell me how you feel about creating, batching content. Do you like to do it weekly? Do you like to do it monthly? Are you overwhelmed by the concept altogether? I want to know more. So I want you to come to my Instagram DMs at Kelli Hayes Smith and showcase what you do. Okay? All right. Do me a favor, before you leave the app and kill the app, go leave a review here. If it is helping you, I want to know. And those reviews are extremely helpful in my podcast being found by other people, which allows me to continue to bring you all content. Have a great rest of your day. You'll hear from me in February.